They told us that KLG, kinship legal guardianship, was not possible, and told me if I don't surrender my parental rights, that they will take them and they will put my daughter where they choose.
They called me up one day and told me if I don't adopt her, she'll be put up for adoption and anybody could adopt her.
I asked for I think it's KOG, they told me I couldn't get it. And I was told that I had to let my kids get adopted.
I'm the first deputy commissioner here at the New Jersey Department of Children and Families. I've been here since 2018, so since the start of this administration. I learned within a couple of years of being here that kinship legal guardianship was considered, or historically had been considered, as a less desirable outcome for children when reunification isn't possible compared to adoption. What I understand is that was out of a desire to make sure that especially young children wouldn't be at risk of further transience in terms of who was taking care of them throughout their life. It was thought that termination of parental rights and adoption was the most risk-averse way of making that happen. But in the meantime, given all the work that we were doing on kinship, looking at this issue of kinship legal guardianship was inevitable.
Me and my husband were having some issues with substance abuse. On Thanksgiving, there was somebody at my house, and my husband and he were just, they were intoxicated, and I didn't really want to be there. So I took my daughter to the only house that I knew to go to, Liz's apartment. And the guy that was at my house with my husband came to the apartment we were at. Somebody in the apartment got into a fight with him. The neighbors called the police. The police came over and asked if there were any minors in the household. And my daughter was actually in the bedroom watching cartoons on the bed.
I got a phone call on Thanksgiving from the police department telling me that they had my granddaughter there and to come immediately to get her. And I said, okay. She had lived with me when she was born for about 2 years before they moved out on their own. So I thought it was going to be just like a temporary thing.
We had a run-in with DCPP a couple years prior. I think that's why it was so serious this time. And my daughter spent a couple weeks in foster care with strangers. It was important to me that she didn't end up in a stranger's hands again.
When KLG was first created, it was designated as a less preferred option to adoption. So for this family, if the grandmother wanted KLG, she can only do that if there was no one else who was willing to adopt the child.
I inquired about KLG, where I wouldn't have to adopt her, that they could actually live with me, and we would all live together.
They told us that KLG, kinship legal guardianship, was not possible, and told me if I don't surrender my parental rights, that they will take them and they will put my daughter where they choose. But if I surrender them, that I eventually could get my parental rights back, and that I could choose who she goes to. So I felt kind of obligated.
It was hard, but I loved her to death, and I just couldn't imagine her going anywhere else. I adopted her, and then my son had passed away right before the adoption took place.
I was in an abusive relationship. I was going, went through a couple of things or whatever, and this act actually became as I was being choked out, and I grabbed the object off the dresser, which ended someone's life, not there, but inside the hospital that, I regret every single day of my life. The judge, they had put a parent aide in my house to come see me. I completed everything that I was supposed to do for my kids. 9 months later, I'm gonna say, I got indicted. They came to take me, so they took my kids. I didn't want nobody to adopt my kids. I just wanted to come home. I wasn't doing life. I wasn't doing 10 years. I wasn't doing extreme time. I was told that I had to let my kids get adopted.
The law recently changed in New Jersey, and it really requires that DCF and the family court systems really look to place with kin first. And what this does is it minimizes the trauma for children and families, and it also reduces the race inequalities that we see in our child welfare system. Nearly half of our children who are in out-of-home placement, they're placed with kin. And I'm really proud about that because that exceeds our national average, and it really shows the work that we're really doing, with our workers and our staff, really to embed that kin-first culture.
I started my career in New York City. And at the time that I started, kinship foster care is what it was called there at that time, was normal. So I came to that stance, I think, very early in my career. I didn't know any different. When I had children of my own, I think I probably tripled down on that position, thinking if something were to happen to me and my husband, if there were things that happened in our family that made it so that my children had to come into foster care, I absolutely would want them with my own relatives, my husband's relatives, or at least people that they know.
We know that when children can be with their families, or if they can be with relatives and having those connections and connections to their communities, we know that they do better, right? They thrive. A child's identity and self-worth, are connected to, their identity and where they come from and wanting to know their family.
They will grow up knowing their family history, their family traditions, and it gives the parents more time to address the issues that they had, whether it's addiction or mental illness, physical illness, financial hardship. It allows the family to heal in its own time instead of having to comply with the litigation timeline.
I was grateful for what I knew my kids were. The adopted parent was my friend. We had the same mutual friends, so her father actually lives on the same block as my mother and father, still to this day. So the kids, they seen their aunts and uncles.
If it's a foster family, I believe you get maybe a 1-hour visit a week. She would have seen me on occasion and know that I was her biological mother, but I think slowly she would have just started recognizing another family as her family, or just, I think her emotional problems would have been much worse.
She's a very good mother. She's very devoted to her daughter. She's very, very good mother. And I thought it was important for her to have custody in case she, wants to build a new family in the future.
I felt like I got to a point in my life where I wanted to do things. My daughter was in a good place, finally got her into a good special needs school. So I decided to take a couple courses, and I realized, I think that it's possible that a judge might consider this being a good time for me to ask for my parental rights back. So I contacted LSNJ Law, and that's when Ms. Chiori started helping. She told me it was very unusual for a parent that lost parental rights to regain custody. But she helped me, I think, more than a lawyer that I would have paid for would have. And she was eventually able to get us joint custody.
When a parent goes through termination of parental rights, all of their legal connections to the child are severed. So even if a parent is able to overcome addiction or mental illness or physical illness, financial hardship, when they try to bring a custody case later, when they are ready to raise their child, their cases are often turned away because they lack standing. And in this particular family's case, the mother filed a custody case not based on the fact that she's the biological mother, but based on the fact that she is a psychological parent. She became a psychological parent because she lived with the child in the same household for many years with the blessing of the adoptive parent, and took on the obligations of parenthood and took on the responsibilities of day-to-day childcare, and developed a bond, a relationship with the child after the termination of parental rights. So that gave her status as a psychological parent to bring the custody case to court successfully.
As far as my daughter was concerned, I'm mom, grandma's grandma. I was financially, emotionally, physically, in every aspect, playing the role as mother. So
My attorney and the judge said, if anything was to happen with the kids, my rights would go back to me. That's the only reason why I surrendered my rights. I told them I wanted my kids back when I came home. I didn't know nothing about, they can't reverse your rights back to you, because come to find out, even though you gave up your rights, either you gave up your rights, it's still as they took your rights. I cried. I didn't know what to do. And then I found me an attorney that helped me and guided me through everything, and I didn't give up. Even after I got my kids back, I still want to help my family and the justice system, that helping my sister, so she can lose her kids, and so I took custody of her kids to help her get herself together, to get her kids back. They my nieces, they love me, and I just want, her mom to get herself together and better and be a better mom, because what was done to me, I would never do to the next person at all.
When families are able to stay together safely, that is what we all have to drive toward. That's actually was the mission of the entire child welfare system, dating back to the first White House Conference on Children in the Wilson administration over 100 years ago. When we aren't able to make that happen and children have to enter into foster care, we need to make sure we do whatever we can to find relatives who are able and willing to take care of those children and support those relatives in caring for the child until that child can go back to their family of origin. If we're not able to do that, there can be a range of consequences. I've met kids who grew up in foster care and are so angry because that separation happened and they were deprived of being raised within their culture and have to go back and try to learn about where they come from as adults. There have always been times when the child's own parent isn't the one who's able to take care of them at that time for a particular reason. It's just really recently when we've put a lot of rules around that. And I think we're in this period now of re-examining those and making sure that the through line needs to be that the child is getting whatever she needs to develop well, to develop safely, and to develop in a way that's in keeping with, her cultural and linguistic history, her whole family's history. We have to try to preserve that to the extent possible as well.